Hey guys, this is Anon, and I'm going to chat about the Tortoise, the Tier 9 British tank destroyer, and I have had a ton of requests to do a review and gameplay on this tank because I think a lot of people really struggle with it, even though it certainly has some good upsides. This is also the first video where I'm going to bring out a different format. I've had also a lot of requests and polls to do a little bit more in-depth analysis on stats and armor profiles, and that will also let you kind of get a little bit of a look at how I analyze tanks, especially when they are first introduced or previewed, to compare towards stuff that's already in the game. So I'm going to also give a big thanks to Quickie Baby, because this is going to really follow his format, which looking at stats comparatively and armor profile and then into some gameplay. So it'll create some longer videos, and you are certainly welcome to skip forward to the gameplay if you would rather, if you're just here for that, but otherwise we will dig in a little bit deep and start to look at these tanks in a little bit different way. So hopefully you'll be able to kind of figure out how to really work off the best positives of a tank and know their weaknesses as well. Okay, so we have pulled up on Tank Compare. I've got the Tortoise, and we're going to compare it to other kind of standard Tier 9 tank destroyers. I don't necessarily want to compare it against every tank, just stuff that is really representative of the tier, especially in high and low ends. So we're going to use the Jagdtiger, the Object 704, the SU-122-54, and the T-95. Now, one of the main things I personally look for when I'm looking at stats are outliers, things that are quite a bit better or quite a bit worse than other tanks at the tier, because that's the stuff that really makes the biggest impact. If a tank just happens to be right in the middle all the way through, that's also great. That just means it's a very solid tank, but those things that are really defining characteristics of a tank is what I tend to look at. So I'm going to do a standard loadout with it, pretty much with the vents and rammer. I put those on pretty much every tank unless it's a sniper, so we'll go ahead and leave that, and also with a full batch of rations. Alright, so first up we're going to obviously look at DPM and see right away that the Tortoise is going to be third best at Tier 9, behind the Jagdtiger, which is the best DPM in all of the game at this point, the SU-122-54, which is third best, if I believe, behind the Object 263. Those might be switched around, I'm not really sure. And then the Tortoise. So that is absolutely fantastic DPM. 3906 is going to be a clear advantage. Anytime you're talking about anywhere in the top 10 in the game or near the top of the tier, that means you can really change how aggressively you can be taking on individual tanks. Penetration is pretty much right there in line. It's not necessarily fantastic, but it should get through most things at that 260 level. That's not going to be too bad, and that's not really surprising either, because the Tortoise has a 120mm gun, which is smaller than most Tier 9 tanks, and certainly less than most Tier 9 tank destroyers, which is what I actually mean. So it means it's going to have a little bit less pen values. APCR at 326 is again right there in that line, so it's going to be a little bit less than some of your giant guns of the Jagdtiger and Object 704, but can certainly get the job done. Again, looking at those outliers, you can see that 3906 is such a huge advantage over tanks like the T-95 and Object 704, so clearly advantage there. Obviously lesser alpha, but that means you get a fantastic rate of fire at 9.76, which is really beneficial when you're trying to track tanks, which is great when something's trying to circle you or trying to pin something down in your team. Something with the slow reloads of those 5s and stuff in that line isn't going to be able to use that strategy, so that's an advantage that something like the Tortoise has. Shell velocity, again, also pretty darn good. Not as great as the Jagdtiger, but quite a bit better than some of these really slow tanks of the Object 704 and the T-95. Also a good advantage when you're sniping to have that high velocity. And 1300 is really, really fantastic in that premium ammo range, and that's what's nice about having the APCR versus heat. Okay, so continuing on, we're going to get into gun handling a little bit. So aim time of 1.95 is obviously pretty fantastic, again below those top 2 DPMs of the Jagdtiger and SU-122-54, and not surprisingly better than those large caliber slow firing guns. Dispersion at 0.275 is pretty fantastic. That's top of the tier for these, which means you're just going to land a lot more shots, which is also really important when your DPM is focused on faster firing guns. You have to fire more shells to do the damage, so you want to make sure those hit as much as possible. Depression at 10 with 20 elevation. That gun depression is super important and fantastic. 10 degrees on a tank destroyer is extremely rare, and that makes a huge difference. And couple that with the aiming arc of 20 degrees, which is one of the best in the game. That's absolutely fantastic, and that also helps your traverse speed. If you're not going to be able to spin very quickly, that arc gives you more reach that can go a lot quicker. It also helps with angling of the tank, which we're going to look at here in just a little bit as well. Mobility obviously is not very good at 20 forward and 10 in reverse. That is going to be not much faster than the T95, which packs quite a bit more armor, and that's extremely dwarfed by the Jagdtiger object and Sue. Obviously this is a very slow lumbering beast, and with the armor profile combination, that's something that this tank certainly struggles with, but that was some really great gun statistics and stuff we need to keep a look at. Good engine power for the tank gives it a pretty decent power to weight ratio, which at least means it'll be able to climb and move around okay. Obviously not as good as the Object 704 and Sue, but those are much faster moving tanks, especially the Sue. That's a really speed-based tank destroyer. Obviously quite a bit better than the T95, and a little surprising that it's better than the Jagdtiger, because it seems like the Jag moves around a little bit better, and that's because of the terrain resistances that we can see coming up there as well. Those are pretty poor terrain resistance at 1.3, 1.5, and 2.1. Even the T95 is going to be a little bit better than that, so that's really going to negate some of that power to weight ratio, but something to kind of keep in mind there. Pretty average traverse speed as well. Not super great for a tank destroyer, but again, coupled with that aiming arc is a huge advantage. Going back to that arc, you can see how small it is for some of these, especially the 54, and that's also really important when you're thinking about camo. If you've got a sniping setup with I can't really talk there, but with a camo net and binoculars, then if you have to move your tank at all in a traverse, then you're going to break that camo and binoc setup. But with 20 degrees of aiming arc, it's far less frequent that you're going to have to move that. Credits and stuff like that I don't really care about a whole lot. View range is the same. It's pretty typical with all of these. Hit points is pretty fantastic. That's going to be top of the tier with the Jagdtiger, which helps a lot considering our armor is not super fantastic. So 229, 152, 102. The thing is, you've got a lot of flat surfaces, so that is going to negate a lot of your armor. Again, we're going to look at that profile here pretty quickly. Obviously a lot better than the objects and the Sue. They're both Russian tanks, less than the Jagdtiger. The Jagdtiger has fantastic sloping, so that's really troll armor. And when we're talking about armor, we're not really going to compare to the T95, because that's not really a fair comparison. That is an armored beast and a totally different playstyle. So not super fantastic in the armor department, especially at equal and higher tiers, but you will be surprised it can be a little bit troll, especially if you're using your angling effectively, and it's very effective against lower tiers when you're in a high tier battle. So okay, so we're going to take a look at the armor profiles here, which, as a lot of us know, if you've faced these tanks before, it is not the most heavily armored tank out there. I have it set against an E75, which is a pretty typical same tier target. Mediums are changing a lot right now, so I didn't really want to focus on that too much. So even with standard ammunition, it's going to be able to get through just about anything looking for. These are 96% chances, 81, 100% of the cupola. The cupola is massive, and where most people aim for it. If you're angling well, you can start to get a little bit of troll in these cheeks, and that's why, like I said, angling is important. You want to always be using as much of your gun depression and gun arc as you can, because that will at least help a little bit. But in general, this is not a tank you want to roll right up into the face of tanks unless you have that DPM advantage, which is something we're going to look at in one of my replays as well. So like I said, even at extreme angles, not a whole lot you can do to bounce some of the big guns. Just kind of what it is with this beast. It's all about the gun, and it's not so much about the mobility. I'm going to switch over, and now you can see how much impact it has as a high tier tank, though. This is versus a T32, where straight on, it's going to really struggle. We're looking down at 30%. Still really high percentage of the cupola, so that's something you have to protect. But as I was talking about the gun arc, where it starts to get so important, as you can swing, there's almost nowhere it's going to be able to pen except for that cupola. And if you're maxing out and using gun depression and arc, that is such a smaller target. It's much more difficult to hit. And that's why I like to angle this tank as much as possible, especially when I'm in close. Even if you switch to APCR on the T-32 frontally, yeah, it's going to be able to do a lot of damage. But as soon as you start to angle, we're starting to get down in 50% rolls where it's just a chance. And so those extreme angling, especially when you're top tier, can be really effective and let you take on a little bit more of a bully role if you end up in those situations. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump into some gameplay now of the Tortoise and try and put a little visuals to all the stats we just looked at. So I'm on Canal and in a tier 10 game, but not horrible matchmaking, only 2 tier 10s on each side. My team basically got into a bit of an argument at the beginning and they all scattered. So I'm going to go ahead and set up in a sniper position because this tank with the DPM and the gun handling, that's a great way to be in. Because of where I can see all the red tanks have gone kind of that other side into the hills on the other side of the river, I know that we're going to be down a couple tanks because of where we're at, and also it's going to mean I'm pretty safe to go ahead and roll up into this common sniping situation. This is a game that's going to move a little bit slowly and develop, but it's going to highlight a lot of what I really like about this tank and what it can do in those situations. So instantly Leo 1 pops up because we've got campers kind of all over the place, which obviously I am camping as well, but I'm really trying to take on more of an active sniper role. So I'm just trying to take whatever shots I've got, and again, you can see that dispersion go to work. It's really fantastic. Switching ammo a lot too because I want to try and work as many of these as I can. I knew the Leo 1's over there, so anytime he pops up, I'm going to try and focus on that and try and get a few of those shots in there. One thing I didn't really talk about in the stats is the fact that this tank has HESH, which is going to be those high penetration HE rounds that are really fantastic on soft and semi-soft targets. This is actually one tank I'm not the best at using HESH at because I kind of forget it's there. The other ammunition on it is really fantastic, so it's not one I go straight to HE with as much. It's something I could improve on this tank, but obviously something to work on. So I turn and start firing at the Tortoise mostly because that's almost a flanking situation, and multiple of their tanks are down in the cap area, which is going to be difficult for me to get to without selling out of my position, and our team has fallen so hard and so fast. I know this is going to be a 1v situation really quickly, and sure enough, in the process of that, I found myself in a 1 versus 4, and am now going to have to go ahead and set up for this. So the good news is I keep binocs on this tank. I still do vents and rammer. I don't do a full camo setup, but I use binocs mostly for these kind of situations. I'm pretty sure that tanks are going to start coming up on my left, and that's why I go ahead and roll forward. Again, I've got that great gun depressions and a good arc, so I'm trying to kind of make myself in a situation if they come up these slopes, I can go ahead and deal with them one at a time. And sure enough, I was right on that. The IS-8 comes up. I like that my teammates said that they're weak because I'm pretty sure that's not true at this point. I didn't know what the IS-8 was at, but I know the STI has some health, and the Waffle, I have no clue where he's at, but I'm assuming he's full health. So the IS-8 is moving forward, and now I can put that great DPM to work. If he's going to continue rushing me like this, it puts me in a great situation because he is not going to be able to do nearly as much damage in the time frame, so I can just keep shooting. I can also see, because that STI came up, that I'm going to have another tank to deal with, and recognize the name on that player. I know he's going to be a little bit harder to kill, even though he's a one-shot. I'm trying to get a shot on the cupola there, which is kind of a roll. It's more like a 50-50 roll if you hit it perfectly, so it's not an ideal situation. But because he's sold down, it's either this or I have to full-on rush him. And I was trying to go ahead and sneak that in, but he's doing such a good job moving around. I'm really left with no other choice but to go ahead and push in, which is not ideal because he's going to be able to get a couple shots on me. This means even if I turn the corner, he's guaranteed one more pen, which is a big difference when I know I'm going to have to fight a full health Waffle. So he does a good job and gets that fire, which is unlucky for me, but just kind of something that goes with it. But I bounced the shot from the Waffendrager, so I know he's to my left, and I'm going to go ahead and relocate here a bit to set up, try and get where he's coming. And you can see here, I'm hoping one of them has seen him and knows kind of the health situation on it. I'm thinking I'm going to have to cap, and I know I have just enough time, so that's why I'm trying to roll in to push him out. There's no way I'll be able to hunt him down if he is happy to just stay in there and not come down and face me. So I hope that at least by rolling near the cap, he'll be not really aware of the time I need and come down, or at least try and cap himself. So that's why I took a wide arc. So obviously he's there, full health, which is the worst thing that could happen because I am only a one-shot. But you can see, again, I'm going to work these really harsh angles. It just makes the tank a smaller profile when you can use a mound right next to me. And I've got this great hash that's going to do huge damage. I've got adrenaline, so the DPM on this is absolutely fantastic. He does the right thing by pushing me here, but I do get a little bit lucky with the RNG in that he swings too much and doesn't get an aim in. He was worried about the timing, I'm sure, and so I was able to go ahead and clear that out and have a nice carry there at the end. So again, just kind of using this tank to its abilities. I know at the beginning it's a lot of sniping, which is what is totally fine to do in this tank, using the DPM, and then trying to just individually take on tanks one at a time in that end situation to go ahead. Okay, so we're going to switch to a very different style of game here on Mirage. This is fantastic matchmaking for a tank like this, as long as you can keep the mediums in front of you. But being top tier with mostly lower tier tanks means I can be a little bit more of a bully. Just like I was showing you with the armor, or the armor versus tier 8 heavy tanks, I have a lot more functional armor essentially against the lower pen tanks here. So I can use my DPM if I have a chance to take a tank one-on-one that I don't think will be able to circle me. I have the advantage to go ahead and roll out, and as long as I'm keeping good angles, I can be much more effective and use the DPM, because absolutely nothing at tier 8 is going to come close. I can essentially kill most two tier 8 tanks before they can kill me DPM versus hit point wise, which is a pretty solid advantage. So I rolled up here in the center very aggressively. I didn't spot over first, and that was because I knew I had gun depression, so I'm in a really nice extreme angle here. It's minimizing that cupola, and I don't have to worry about stuff coming through quite as much. I was trying to get some Hess shots in, but they ran so fast that instead, again, perfect targeting just because I was talking against this T-32. He knows he has no chance, so I'm going to go straight for those drive wheels. Because I have the great rate of fire, I can keep him locked in place. Even if I'm not the one that finishes him off, I'm holding him there for my team, and that gets rid of a really solid tank instantly. So they've pushed around to my flank, and that's something I need to be aware of, and especially because there's so many there to the left, I don't want them to be able to roll back. But again, I'm going to use this gun depression on the side of these hills. I'm just making my tank a lot smaller and going straight for drive wheels. This is a tank that it's so accurate and has the great rate of fire, so I'm going to aim at drive wheels most of the time just to try and keep stuff in place. It's always a good tactic in general, but if you have a tank that is going to miss a lot of shots and the dispersion values aren't super great, you have to consider that shoot a little bit different, because you don't want to waste shells either and miss and kind of sacrifice damage, especially when you're a top tier tank. So again, I'm going to play aggressor. If this was a tier 10 battle, I would be holding back to kind of get myself in a different position, but because I'm top tier and I can see what is out there facing me, tanks that I'm not particularly afraid of, I can go ahead and push out and be a little bit more aggressive with it. I just don't want anything to flank me. That's my number one concern at this point. I also have a lot of hit points that I've been conserving, so I have that as a resource as well. But my number one goal is just keeping tanks from flanking. That's why I keep checking back. I'm watching the mini-map here pretty heavily, because if those tanks drop from their perch behind me, I'm going to instantly spin around, because the Panther II is going to take a long time to kill me, even on my backside, where he's going to pen pretty consistently. Just DPM-wise, it'll take him a while to do. So luckily he stays out and lets me go ahead and get that kill. So now I can swing around and bring everything in the front again, which is always the goal. And now they're dropping down, which is again perfect timing for me. This is just a very convenient game. They're playing into the strengths of my tank very well, and I certainly appreciate that. I can see the Patton is mostly stock, so I'm going to turn onto the T-54 because that's a little bit more dangerous, at least until the Patton rushes me. And you can see here I can't keep up with the traverse of that Patton, but that gun sweeping around 20 degrees is just massive. From left to right, that's 40. And so it's just a lot of ability to be able to swing that gun around. And actually, I'm not sure on that stat. I don't know if it works on both sides, if it adds up, or if that's total. But either way, it gives me a lot more traverse to go ahead and lock him in place, catch up with my gun, and finish him off. So hopefully that helps a little bit with the Tortoise. Two very different styles of play. Just kind of a lot of reading the matchups and knowing what to do. Hopefully you like this new style of video. I'm not going to do it all the time, but when appropriate, I think it can be helpful. And so hopefully you enjoy that. So thanks a lot, guys, and take care.